Hi, okay, so I'm going to get this presentation ready, so thank you for being very patient. And we're going to talk a little bit about culture and how all of these things with culture and cultural diversity of our students in our classroom and their families impact how we teach and what we do. We are now moving beyond just teaching the academic content. We have to look at the bigger picture. So that's what our presentation is about today. My name is Jennifer Owen, and I really wanted to have this meeting together with all of you in person, but due to time constraints and MCAS testing and all those other obligations, I thought it would be best to record the meeting, send it out, or send out a link where you could view it, and then you could provide me with some feedback, and we can talk about it, maybe through an online chat or something where we can talk about a little bit about it further. So let's take a look at how this works. We're going to talk about the diversity in our schools. Our schools are loaded with various cultures, and we are now forced to address that. And how do we do that? How do we make our schools stronger? How do we impact our students better? How do we help them? So we're going to talk a little bit about building relationships with our parents and families of our students. We are going to talk about a little bit about how to increase parental involvement in our schools. We're going to talk about the school-home transition and what that means, and how helping parents learn their role in helping to encourage learning at home. How do we do that? We are going to talk about shared decision making. How do we involve our parents and families of diverse cultures to participate in shared decision making in our schools, in our districts, in our communities? And then lastly, we're going to address the issue of providing or helping to connect parents and families with the community resources or things that they might need. So we're going to start with building relationships, and I found this video that I wanted to share with you that talks a little bit about the idea behind building relationships. I thought it was fitting, so I'm going to play that for you.
Although it's very important to build relationships with ELL students' parents, with those parents, it's really sometimes very difficult to do. In my school district, we have over 100 languages represented, and unfortunately, we don't have translators for all of those languages. So, although it's important to make that contact, it can be very difficult. When a student is registering for school, they usually bring with them someone who speaks English. And so I ask the secretaries to please have them come up to my room, so that while they have an interpreter there with them, usually a cousin or an aunt or a friend of the family, I can ask some of those questions and introduce myself to the family and see what questions they have. It's also important to have to make sure that any communications that you have that are being sent out about conferences, about family nights, about parental involvement opportunities, if at all possible, to get those sent out in the native language. But at the same time, many of my students' parents don't read and write in their native language. So if you have the opportunity and you have someone who speaks that language, if you could follow up with a phone call, that's a great way to get families to come. Now, in our case, in our schools, we have right now 3 students and that we don't have interpreters for. When I need to call home, I call home and try to leave a message on an answering machine. If someone calls and they say no English, I'll try to see if I can call back. But if I leave a message on an answering machine, I speak very slowly and clearly, because usually, even if no one in their house speaks English, they know someone who speaks English, and they'll save the message and find someone who can interpret and translate the message for them.
All right, so the biggest takeaway I took from this video, motorcycle going by my house. The biggest takeaway I took from this video was the fact that in order to start building the relationships, it's best to do it when you have somebody that can be the person to be the communicator, the interpreter. And I think that is the key thing to the start of any relationship building, is knowing that we're going to reach out to the interpreter. The interpreter can communicate what we're trying to say to the parents, and they can communicate back to us. And that is the crux of starting a positive relationship with our parents. The next thing that this video talked about was communication, and possibly communicating in the native language when possible. So that's not always easy to do. Like, I know for me, English is my primary and only language that I speak. Do I understand a little bit of Spanish? Very small amount. In fact, not really enough to have a full conversation. But I know that I can communicate a little bit, un poquito, and that's not very even good. And I can't even speak English right now. But if you're making the strides to try to communicate in the native language, I think the parents are going to see that we're actually trying to build that relationship. So, if it's French or Chinese, or even maybe learning some of the welcoming phrases to just kind of break that ice. The next part that this talked about, or that I took away from, was establishing good rapport with parents by reaching out to them. So what does that look like? Well, you could either reach out with a handwritten note. Maybe you send home a note with a student to reach out to a parent, or maybe if they have technology, you can send a text. But what this person spoke about was reaching out by making a telephone call. And even though you might not speak that parent's language, if you follow up with a call, if possible, you are able to leave a message maybe, or communicate and speak very slowly and clearly, because often there is someone there who can help with the translation, or the parents will save the message and have somebody translate for them. But I guess the other thing that I took away is that we really need to meet parents where they are. We need to figure out where they are and what kind of things we can pull in to help start building those relationships. That's the only way that this is going to work with our culturally diverse students, their families, and their parents and their families. So when I think about how to help a parent, I think about like somebody coming into a brand new school, or I think, if I were to put myself in their shoes, what would be the things that I would worry about? The first thing, if I were coming to a brand new environment, my major concern would be, where am I going to live? Where am I living? The next thing I would be concerned with is, how am I going to provide for my family? How do I keep my family safe? These are all things that our families are worried about immediately. Basic needs. What's my role? Is my role the breadwinner? Am I being home taking care of the family? Am I doing both? What's my role? How do I communicate to get my needs met? So maybe I need food support or housing support or something, but how do I communicate to get my needs met? And next is, how am I going to educate my child? And what does the education system look like? And what do? I don't know any of this. So I kind of look at, when I'm trying to help my parents of culturally diverse students, I kind of look at it through that lens. Like, what if I was being dropped off in a foreign country and I had no idea where I am, what am I going to do? And these are the questions that would come through my mind. So I found this other video that I wanted to share that talks a little bit about the importance of communication.
Well, for English language learners, in particular, and recent immigrants, I think the big issues are, you need personnel who can communicate with the parents in their language, who understand the culture, who also understand that many immigrant parents are more deferential to schools. They are more likely to not know that they need to be advocates for their children. And particularly if they're working hard, which many immigrants are, and have long hours, don't have the time to be as involved, and don't understand the importance of being involved in their child's education. And that's the reason why it's essential that schools engage and hire personnel who do have the language and cultural skills to build relationships with parents. They approach this as organizing of parents, to get parents to understand they have to play a role in supporting their children and supporting that school, and in helping them to understand what a good education is, so they can advocate for their children, which might seem ironic, but there's a healthy tension that you want between parents and schools. You want parents insisting on a good education for their children. When that happens, usually schools perform better. And we see that to be the case in most middle-class communities, where parents are very clear on what they're entitled to and usually are very clear about how to advocate for their rights. When that happens in immigrant communities, schools improve as well.
All right. So the takeaway to this is that there are these pathways that we might need to help our parents navigate. Not only our EL parents or our English learner parents or our culturally diverse parents, but maybe all parents. Like I hate to kind of group them, although I feel that those who are not English language learners, or who have been in the United States, or who have been in our classrooms for a long time, kind of know how to operate and know what to do. But like, I think this goes out for any parent. So the first thing that they talked about was providing providing skilled personnel who are able to interpret the information that we can provide for parents to help them navigate the school system if that's needed. And they talked about how many parents struggle with school-related issues, not because they don't want to, or they don't think school is important. They just don't know. So reach out to help those parents. They talked about helping parents to understand what is a good education and how is this achieved. A lot of our culturally diverse students and their families are coming from environments where education wasn't a priority. They didn't know really what it looked like. Many of the parents didn't attend schools themselves. So what is a good education, and how can they help their kids achieve that? We also need to maybe help them to appropriately advocate for their children, in ways that follow the policy, in ways that are appropriate. I mean, it makes sense to us, but maybe they don't really know, what services are available for their kids, how to get certain resources, what kind of things that they need to do at night to make sure that they're getting all the education that they need. We need to stress to our parents the importance of parental involvement at schools, and how we want to work together as a team to make sure that their child is getting the best education possible. And we also need to help parents learn the benefits of encouraging their child to continue to learn at home. Learning doesn't just happen at schools. It also follows suit at home, and we're going to talk a little bit about that a little bit further. And lastly, we need to help parents understand what community supports are available to them and how to access those. We're going to talk about that as well. So, increasing parental involvement. I found this video. I thought it was really neat, of some of the concerns that parents might have.
Parents have to be accountable at their child's school. The teachers cannot raise your child.
At what point does personal responsibility come in? Because we can't do everything.
That foundation starts at home before they walk out that door.
What we do as parents in the school, it matters.
Our parents sometimes feel threatened by just coming into the school. Some of it is that parents are just afraid.
There's a class divide in schools, and so we service children that live in poverty. We have the college degrees, and we're the middle class people. And so there's a certain intimidation that comes along with that.
I've always said in education is a three-part stool. There's like parent involvement, student involvement, and teachers.
We have to meet our parents where they are. We have to invest in them emotionally and socially.
It's not assuming that everyone knows how to be a
good parent. You know, sometimes what people are doing is really the best in what they know how to do.
We can't have this mentality of we're up here and they're down here when in fact we were down here just like them. I was a single mom. There were times where my lights were cut off. Guess what? There were times where I didn't have gas. I am just like you, and I can connect with you, and there's no judgment in what you're going through.
When parents are invited and they don't show up, it's a great opportunity to reflect, to see if we've opened the door enough for them to actually come.
I really like this video because it talks about some of the fears that parents have, and we need to, as teachers and educators in school systems, we need to assume that parents want to be involved. They want to be involved, but there are barriers that prevent them from doing so at times. The barriers might be that there's time constraints. There's not enough time to do everything. Maybe it's a single parent family, or maybe it's dual parents family, or maybe mom and dad are working a couple jobs just to survive. Maybe there's all these other demands and they just can't get involved. That's one barrier. Maybe the barrier is transportation. Maybe they can't get there. Maybe they want to be involved in the schools, but they can't get there. They don't know what to do about that. Maybe it is a child care issue. Maybe they have their children and they don't want to leave them at home, or they don't know what to do with them. They don't know whether or not it's correct to bring them with them. And lastly, the one thing that this video stressed was that a lot of parents have fear of being judged. And so we have to look at that. Like, are we judging our parents? What are our biases and how are we looking at them? And we really need to make sure that our schools are, and our mindsets are open to all these dynamics that are going on in a family's life. So the takeaways that I took from that is always ask or invite parents to volunteer or participate, because we don't know. Maybe it wasn't a good time that one time, but maybe this time is a good time, or maybe that activity didn't interest them, but this one they feel that they could participate. So always ask and continue to ask and invite parents to participate. We need to extend involvement to all family members, not just the parents. We need to create things where children are welcome to come, or we can figure out, maybe they live with grandma and grandpa, aunts and uncles, and that they're welcome to join. I think making that connection, we need to realize that the family dynamic is different for all of us, and what that looks like, we need to not judge what that looks like. We need to have a clearly defined avenue for ways that parents can get involved. Are they getting involved by just coming to open houses, parent conferences, other activities? Maybe it's just an open lines of communication through texting and calling or emailing or that kind of stuff. How do we want them to be involved? Maybe we want them to sit on a committee. We need to figure out what those avenues are and put those pieces together and get that information out to our families. If we have events, we need to offer them during several time periods, days, evening, weekends. We have no idea what the time limitations are for parents, and we need to be able to adjust our events and activities to meet all different family structures and needs. We need to add services that address the barriers, such as the transportation and the child care issues. And this one I thought would be a good idea. When I'm invited to go somewhere, I often think about what's in it for me. So what's in it for them? Maybe offering some sort of incentive to come. Why would I want to come? So I know that this is something that's going to help my child, but so what? Isn't that, how am I going to participate? What's in it for me? So maybe offering an incentive, maybe a raffle, maybe a raffle for a gift basket, or maybe some sort of technology piece, or maybe a gift card to the grocery store, or whatever is going to get them through those doors. So the minute we get them through the doors, we can kind of work with them and they can start to gain our trust. And the last thing that this video talked about was reaching out to inactive parents or those parents that didn't make it, whether it be a phone call, hey, we invited you to the last open house. We're sorry that you couldn't make it. We really, missed you. If parents know that they were missed, or it really signifies that they are important. And I think that's the biggest piece, is letting people know their role is important. Okay, so we're going to talk about how, once we get our parents involved, how do we incorporate this whole school to home transition? So how can we help transition our learning from our schools to our homes, and what is the parents' roles? And I started thinking about that, myself being a parent, and like, what is my role at home versus my role at school? And like, after I've been at work all day or at school all day teaching, and I come home, and like, how do I help my child? And what is my role? And sometimes my oldest daughter comes home with stuff that I just don't know what to do with, and I can't help her with. And so I started thinking about that, and I found this funny parody that I wanted to share with you that kind of addresses the issues of the parents' role at home and helping kids with their homework, but not only for our culturally diverse families or our EL families, but also just any parents. So I wanted to share this with you because I thought it was funny.
Tomorrow science is about dominant alleles. Dominant of what? This is algebra.
Okay, no, we're graphing.
So let's make a Punnett square. We need to. So if Sally had.
Sally? We can't help with homework any longer. 'Cause now she's older and it's getting real. When I was her age, I was playing Frogger. I've never learned codominant alleles. The Punnett square for blood type makes my brain hurt. Is sucking at genetics hereditary? And math work problems, they are making mom go insane. If Jeff eats a third of a half of a pizza, how much would that be? And as our brains do wander, it's 9 o'clock at night. We've been at this for 3 hours and still can't get it right. And I'm feeling dumber than I ever thought I might. 'Cause we can't help with homework anymore. We've forgotten about the Napoleonic War.
All right, so you get the point. I'm going to pause it right there, and I'm going to keep going. So, our parents our kids are coming home, and our parents need to help them keep the learning up at home, and they're sitting there and they're frustrated just as I am. And we need, as teachers, because we are the expert at teaching, we need to teach our parents, our culturally diverse parents, and all of our parents in general, their role in learning at home. Okay? Their roles in encouraging increased learning at home for their students. And their role is not to sit down and be frustrated with the homework. That's not their role. Okay? And we need to teach them that. We need to teach them that, we understand that the material is hard, the content is hard. They might not have that educational background, and that's okay. But they can help a child with their organization. This is one of their roles at home. They can help provide a distraction-free area. They can check in with the child to be sure that the homework was completed, or if it wasn't completed, why? Was there an issue? And if there was an issue, we need to teach parents and families that it's okay to communicate that issue back to the teacher. So, for example, when my daughter comes home and she's working on a problem or something that I just don't understand, I will write a note back to the teacher that communicates, hey, this is what we tried. I'm not really sure how this works. Can you please provide some more support? And that's okay. In this case, as teachers, we need to also provide web links for assignments, teaching videos, or other resources to help parents. They need to have access. So, when a child's going home and they have to solve proportions and a parent has no idea what a proportion is because they don't really know math in general, both the student and the parent are going to get frustrated. But if there's a resource where they can access maybe a teaching video or a resource, they're less likely to be frustrated. Okay, the idea is to ease the frustration and to let the parents know that we're on their side and we're going to help them however we can. Homework is an extension of class learning, and we need to let parents know that it's okay if they don't get it, because we're gonna revisit it when they get back to school. And lastly, we need to communicate with parents about teachers' expectations about homework. So for me, when I was teaching 7th grade math, I would let all of my parents know at the beginning of the year that 20 minutes was the maximum amount of time that a child should be spending on their math homework. And if they've reached a frustration level or they've gotten to a point where they've spent longer, then please just sign the paper and that's okay, and I will accept it for full credit. What kind of expectations are we setting our parents up, setting our students up, and help our parents to know that. So those are some ideas or methods to encourage learning at home and how to help our parents to encourage learning at home. And so I want to move on a little bit and talk about encouraging shared decision making. So now that we've kind of talked about building relationships, we kind of talked about helping parents and understanding their roles at school and at home and in regards to homework, we know that we want our parents to come in and be part of the decision making. All viewpoints and different viewpoints are essential. So in order to do this, we should be inviting our culturally diverse parents to participate and volunteer in the classroom if they can. So it's going to transform learning. If we have a parent of a different culture who's sitting in the classroom, not only are they going to understand what the dynamic is and what's going on in the classroom, where they might be able to take part in what's going on, and they might be able to offer support and give their viewpoints and maybe help us with making decisions as to what we should do. Maybe we can ask them, do you think that this is something that they could do, and get their feedback. We should invite our parents to help plan and participate in any kind of school-related activities. They can serve on a committee if they want to or if they have the means to. And that might start to bridge some of those gaps and help them, encourage them to make some decisions in our schools. We need to invite them to communicate with school leaders when issues arise or they don't understand a policy. So, something happens, a student violates a policy, and, a parent freaks out. Well, communicate with us that you don't understand the policy so we can help you understand the policy. And we need to invite our parents to serve on school groups and other committees. So those are some of the ideas that I wanted to talk about how we get our parents to participate in some shared decision making. And so now let's take a look at promoting community supports for parents and families. So parents and families are coming, and that there's a ton of resources out there, and maybe they don't know how to access those resources. And so educators can be that link and help them, families, and help students get those resources. So what kind of steps can educators take to help promote the resources that are available? So I put together this list based on some feedback. The first thing we need to do is we need to work together with agencies and others to put together a list of available resources. Looking at, what's available. Is there free clothing available? Is there food pantries available? Is there emergency shelter available? Are there interpretive service, or are there liaisons that help with communication? What kind of resources are available? After building relationships with parents and families, we're going to begin to start to identify their needs. I have been able to identify right away that, maybe this group of people, they're not getting enough food at home. And so we're going to set them up with some resources to help them with that. We also can refer our families to the resources if possible. You know, some families want to keep everything hush-hush and they don't want to talk about it. If possible, we can refer our families to resources. But if not, we should be able to bring the resources to the families to help them with getting the resources they need. So, just to wrap up this presentation, we talked about the diversity in our schools. We talked about building relationships. We talked about parental involvement in schools. We talked about school-to-home transition. We talked about learning at home. We talked about shared decision making. And we also talked about community resources.